Hello, good evening everybody to tonight's Regen Chat. We're as happy as cow and clover this evening, and we're focusing on regenerative farming but from a dairy angle. So we're joined by Sarah Appleby and Tim Downs, and also Tim's and Sarah's mum and dad, just in case Tim's internet goes down. So there's all sorts going on. So thank you for your patience in joining us this evening. So just to begin with, the plan for this evening is myself and Nick will just have a bit of a catch up. We'll then introduce Sarah and talk through her business. We'll then move and have a chat to Tim as well. And then we've got a few talking points as we go through this evening. Also on the call this evening is Joseph Keating, who is the question master. So he will be monitoring the chat and Q&A function. Ideally use the chat, and he'll be monitoring that and interrupting at certain points during the evening just to catch up on questions. So if anything comes up, everybody is on mute apart from the panelists. And so if you have anything to add to the meeting, just type it into chat and we'll deal with it at the appropriate time as we go through this evening. So yeah, that's the plan of attack. So Nick, how are things up in your way? A bit wet.
Well, I've had my fringe cut. I've got a fringe now because I'm 45 and that's what you do. But no.
Did you do it yourself or was it done professionally?
No, I did pay to have it done. No, everything's all right up here. We're just quite wet. The cows and calves have just come in and the young stock are out on bale grazing. Yeah, no, everything's all right, really. I think Reno has finally nearly finished the eggmobile, just as winter comes. And yeah, everything's all right.
Excellent.
And I'm looking forward to tonight because I milk cows for, my mum and dad are dairy farmers and I milk cows for a long time. I was so sad when I was about 16. I was so obsessed with Holstein breeding. I used to take the genus bull books to bed with me because I used to go through them and through them and through them. So I was really quite obsessed with genetics and bulls. But then also I've seen my mum and dad go from quite a quaint dairy farm of 70 cows out most of the time, out all summer, to now they milk 170, I think. Quite intensive in a lot of the time, a lot of slurry, because you've got to have that many because you're producing commodity. So I think this will be interesting, and dairy farming regeneratively, yeah, it's going to be a good conversation.
Excellent. And you are thinking of getting a house cow?
Yeah, because I've worked out today that we drink a lot of milk, like a lot of milk, 3 litres a day, I think. So I'm gonna get a house cow.
Okay.
And Joseph's going to teach me how to make butter.
It's not getting any less weird, so that's good. So the news from mine is I'm going for a haircut at 4:15 tomorrow. So I'm just getting in just before lockdown. And yeah, I've got quite a lot. I've also done some discussion groups this week again, trying to get in before lockdown comes. So that's just sort of rushing around.
And how are you coping with the dark nights, Liz? Not well.
I did get my sad lamp out of the cupboard the other day and sat in front of it this morning while I was doing some emails. I'm not sure it's going to help, but psychosomatic, it might help. You never know.
Yeah.
It's not, I can't necessarily, it burns through my retinas, so it might affect my eyesight too. So
You'll be blind and miserable.
Exactly, I won't be able to see the darkness. Just be all dark. Anyway, so yes, that's where we are. So nothing particularly, it's just, I think this stage for me, the transition into winter is always a bit of a challenge. Once you get into winter proper, I'm happy. It's still too close to summer for me at this stage. So, although fascinating, I think we possibly should move on.
We need to move on.
So I'll introduce Sarah, or get Sarah to introduce herself as well. So Sarah, can you just take us through yourself and your business and just a bit about an update? So just a bit of background quick, and then we'll move to Tim, and then we'll keep asking you questions as we go through this evening.
Hi. How quick, Liz? That's the thing, damn it.
Less than 10 minutes, more than 2, somewhere in that zone.
Ramble. Once I've got that open mic, there is no children interrupting, no nothing. I am Sarah Appleby. We moved here. I got married to Paul Appleby 17 years ago, something like that. So although I come from a dairy farming background, I had a bit of time in between doing other things, and then I said I'd never marry a dairy farmer and never move back to Shropshire, and did that. Oh man. But it's just, I mean, it's something that I can't imagine doing anything differently. So we have been here farming. Paul's family are Cheshire cheesemakers, so that's been something that when we moved here, sorry, my computer's wanting to interfere. When I came here and was just trying to, I guess, understand the scope of the business, the cheese making is something that is really fascinating, and it's really integral to us as dairy farmers. But I've also got that real, as I said, that dairy farming background, organic, obviously because of mum and dad and Tim and Louise. So I came here, and I think mum and dad and Tim and Louise would say, I am a really questioning. So I came here saying, why are we doing this? How come this is happening? And the more I got involved, I suppose, the more questions I started to ask about our farming methods and our cheese making. And actually for me, it's been that massive link between the two that I don't think I ever had an eureka moment, but I just felt that the two things were not really colluding, that they were quite separate. So we were dairy farming in a pretty intensive way. It didn't sit comfortably. It didn't sit comfortably with Paul and I taking the business forward. I think this was almost before the regenerative sustainable conversation. I think it was definitely the organic dairy farmer in me, the questioning ability of how, why, what's the future. The other big element is the profitability of dairy farming. So there was lots of elements that came together a couple of years ago that we probably did then have a bit of a eureka moment of hang on a minute, this is not heading in the direction in so many elements. And we wanted to be farming sustainably. We wanted to be making cheese in a way that we felt was really true to our heritage and tradition and the artisan scope of how we market and sell our cheese. But we felt that these two things were even coming further and further ostracized. So we definitely wanted to bring those together.
And how many, because you're milking quite a few cows, aren't you, with this? So it's not just you and 5 house cows like Nick will be in a year's time. It is on a scale.
Yeah. So we were 400 cows plus. They were pretty much in all year round. It was an expensive system. We have a really phenomenal consultant called Peter Long, and there comes a point, doesn't there? And I think we have talked about this with this intergenerational farming, that actually there's a point where I suppose you either those decisions happen organically, or some of it becomes, are we going to move forward in a way that's profitable and therefore sustaining a future? And is it going to be farming in a way that is also sustainable? And those two major questions we've had to, I mean, a little bit like turning the QE2, it's definitely happened slowly, but it was a definite moment where we felt that we had to start turning that wheel, and we have never looked back. It has been something that I guess we were coming towards, but it has given us that absolute enthusiasm and commitment again to this regenerative type of farming, from, I guess, going down a much more industrial route. We've still got the liquid milk. We still are farming 360 or so head of dairy, and we are by no means there, wherever there may be. We are definitely on a on some trajectory, which is fascinating, and I love it for that. I love it for that reason of constantly learning. But yeah, it has been a big change.
There probably wasn't one thing that changed first, but what was the sort of with you and your consultant, what did you focus on first to sort of start the sort of ball rolling, I suppose?
I suppose we looked at, well, very first we stood in the middle of our farm and we looked around and we said, why aren't we grazing this? We're really lucky with the farm being in the middle of a grazing platform. We also looked at our inputs and really drilled down with the figures, and read and learned and listened to our land, listened to my family, listened to our cheese buyers, our wholesalers, those consumers, and to ourselves and to our children, and tried to sort of get an understanding of how we wanted it to look. And yes, it is about profitability, but it's also about the inputs and the outputs, and trying to sit those together, plus having the cheese business, which is really crucial to our business. So we could have changed everything and gone, right, we're not going to do dairy, we're going to do beef, we're going to do it with this type of grazing, and I'm really keen on this carbon cycle and listening to the likes of Gabe Brown, etc. But we have ultimately got our cheese business, which is really important, and how we change our dairy management, we always have to have one eye on the vat. So we're definitely not there yet. We have had conversations today about how we're going to move forwards now. We've sort of done those 2 or 3 years and we've been massively happy with it, but I'm always looking to try and get to Z, maybe just slowing down. There's a few more letters.
And you mentioned your cheese buyers, so they were sort of involved in these conversations, and also asking you, I suppose, difficult questions, or what their customers were asking as well. So there was feedback coming up as well as the supply chain. Yeah,
so we sell a lot to Neal's Yard Dairy in London, who have been massive ambassadors of raw milk cheeses, territorial cheeses like Cheshire, Wensleydale, Lancashire, all of those, that they could see that these heritage cheeses were dying out 20 years or so ago, and the guy called Randolph Hodgson really tried to join that gap between I guess people eating cheese, people making cheese, and them as cheesemongers being able to talk about it. Because I think sometimes as cheese producers and farmers, we're not good at that education. We're not good at saying, hang on a minute, we're doing this because we just kept making our Cheshire in a way that we were really valued, but maybe just needed to reconnect. And they came to us saying, we're getting customers coming into our shops in London saying, what, I want to know about the animal welfare. I want to know if this cheese has come from a grazed herd. And, we've had a really massive vegan movement, which, although is a very small minority, they are asking uncomfortable questions sometimes about dairy farming. And although I always think that some of those questions are proving, difficult to answer, there are a lot of people that want to know more and engage with where their food comes from. And I think it's really important that we can answer it, even though sometimes it can be a little bit uncomfortable. And that going hand in hand with the regenerative and the carbon culture, there seems to be a great groundswell at the moment, which definitely for us has, I suppose, come from a lot of different angles, if that makes sense.
And I sort of, sorry, Nick.
Sarah, since Corona, how has your cheese selling had to change? How have you dealt with that?
Yeah, it's been really, I mean, I think we're a really resilient type, aren't we, farmers? We tend to sort of like, right, okay, what's now? What should we do now? Okay, let's deal with it. We had a real shocker. We sell a lot into the hospitality. We sell a lot overseas. We had a couple of weeks with everyone furloughed with no cheese being made. And then we've had this really phenomenal response by our wholesalers. And I think a lot of that was put in place a couple of years ago when we started all these conversations. So I think the more you can engage with people, the more you can talk about why these cheeses are need to be eaten, as like saying about, you know, in order to save a rare breed, eat it. That you know, the uniqueness of us, I suppose, is something that hopefully we will always be able to overcome in some shape or form. But we have had to make our businesses more robust because of the fluctuating sales that are going to be happening for the next 12 months or so. But we found that the wholesalers were amazing at turning into e-commerce, that they got different platforms. They were able to sell online a lot more. We're in the Jamie Oliver subscription box this month, which has been phenomenal. Just, you know, he's got such reach that, and he's taken real care to understand our stories. He's got in touch and he's discussed with Neil's Yard and made sure that he's got an opportunity and he's not wasting it, that he's able to talk about our cheeses, you know, I suppose almost straight from the dairy in a way.
And I'm just intrigued also by, do you, in terms of from a cheesemonger perspective, do they do a bit like wines where they just bring in all the different Cheshires and then they're all not necessarily spitting them into a spittoon, but can people detect a cow that's been grazing grass versus maize versus other feeds?
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to communicate, because there was this whole thing about, you know, cheese being consistent, and there are some of our buyers that definitely want that consistency, and the closer you get to supermarket selling, they definitely are looking for a more consistent product, because you're not having a cheesemonger there to say, try this, the cows are grazing such and such a paddock, or this was made on the 13th of July when the weather was really hot and the cheesemaker was in a really great mood and it was put to the left of the storeroom, and all of that affects it. I mean, we always talk about our cheeses being like little time capsules. You'll never get the same bite even being the same, but you'll certainly never get the same batch or the same single cheese within that batch being the same. So that's celebrating the nuances is definitely where we're at, but it's getting that across, isn't it, when we're here on the farm and in the dairy, and then maybe forgetting that next bit, like, oh my God, you want to eat it or buy it? Oh geez, I need to let you know. So we're talking a lot about sending all the notes and keeping those airways open with what we do and how we do it.
Thank you. And what I should have explained at the beginning is, by sheer coincidence, Nick and I were talking about doing something on dairy, and so we approached Sarah and we also approached Tim, and we didn't know they were brother and sister. That's the bit that we should have explained better at the beginning, and that's why Chris and John are also on the call. And so it was
I said to Tim, oh yeah, the other person I've got is Sarah Appleby. I think she's quite close to you. Do you know her? He said, Yes, I know her rather well. My sister. Yeah, so it was really odd. Yeah,
and it's amazing, and I really definitely value Mum and Dad and Tim and Louise for that, you know, support and the chat, all the chat. It's good to chat, good to talk and listen.
Thanks, Sarah. Nick, are you all right to on the next bit with Tim?
Yeah. So I think Tim, if you say Tim Downs to anyone, they'd kind of, if they're a dairy farmer, they kind of annoyingly know who he is. And you're on mute, Tim.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now.
Yeah, well, I've stalked you for a while, and I've stalked you in the last couple of weeks. I've just been actually listening to you on a podcast in America with Omsko.
That was fascinating. That was recorded by I think it was Gabe Brown's son who did the podcast for Organic Valley. Very intrigued about how those English farmers, how they farm over the pond. So we learned some new techniques out at the Acres conference, and thoroughly enjoyed that. Met some very interesting people.
Yeah, so. That was really good. I just wonder if you could maybe tell us a bit about your farm, like generations ago, just a bit of history. I don't know if maybe your dad will need to put you right on a few things, but I just like a potted history of your farm.
Luckily, he's a little bit far away to nudge me in the ribs if I get it wrong, but we came here in 1953 into the farm at Longnaw, just south of Shrewsbury, as tenant farmers with a landlord who's now based in London. And we took on the farm, which was a mixed farm. My grandparents started off with a few dairy cows, pigs, and what I often used to hear about was a chicken business that my granny used to run with 200 hens. I'm not a big fan of hens, that needs to be added. But the dairying side of things was something my grandfather was very keen with, and British Frisians were his thing, and I think the pinnacle of his sort of farming was having one of the British Frisians chosen as a bull for the genus stud, if I'm right. And
did you have a poster of it up on your wall, Nick, just to check?
What was he called?
I've no idea going back, but certainly grazing and those sort of things were high on the agenda. In 1984, we were a clover trial farm for Scottish Agricultural College, and there began a relationship between Dad and somebody called Johnny Bax, who was an out-and-out clover enthusiast, clover, silage, bugs. And I remember going to a talk where he put up a video of all the microbes moving around inside the rumen, and he could have spoken for hours on that one video about this interaction with this part of the animal and how you've got to keep it in a symbiotic relationship with all the feed you put in. And absolutely fascinating guy, and somebody who we worked with thereafter. So everyone is, I suppose, stimulated by different people and given a different direction. We were very lucky to meet people like Johnny Bax and various others who were keen on soils, grazing, silage, animals being a big part of it as well. So then we took on other farms that the landlord had, and we converted a sheep flock and became organic in 2000. So in 1998 we made the decision, because the market was growing, to become organic. And spent 6 months at a reasonable organic milk price, and then everyone decided they'd made their conversion process, and it slumped, and that was part of the roller coaster ride for the next 10 or so years, with big encouragements from government for people to convert into organic. And then the price would drop down to virtually commercial prices, and then you'd question whether we'd done the right thing. We've stuck at it through and through, and learnt a lot along the way, controlling costs, being very extensive or intensive grazers rather than extensive and true New Zealand or Irish low cost. But we've always, my wife Louise and I went out to New Zealand and learned how to graze effectively over there, and we've applied different managements from all over the world. I was lucky enough to do a Nuffield scholarship in 2003, and that's had a big impact on how we farm, how we engage with others, to very much like Sarah, listen to the right people at the right time and take on what you think is going to make the biggest impact on your business.
And what was your kind of title of your Nuffield?
It was, pretty topical. How farmers equip themselves with knowledge through discussion groups. So visited some really fascinating groups, both in Western Australia, looking at large-scale arable farms where they were paying a group of farmers organise themselves to work out how they were going to cope with salinity issues. So soil was a big part of their thinking, and by changing management further up the hill, for instance, they could reduce the problems with salinity on their own farms. But they'd have to group and organise people and coordinate different farming practices. So planting trees, for instance, had a big effect on lowering the water table, which it sounds counterintuitive, but by lowering the water table, you could reduce the capillary action of bringing salt to the surface and therefore making it unfarmable. To dairy farm discussion groups, and then lucky enough to visit Argentina, looking at their soils and beef groups as well.
So you'll be part of a discussion group now, I'm thinking, or a few.
And then came back and was always part of the Shropshire Grassland Society offshoot grazing group. That became Star Grazers. We've had some fantastic meetings, some really good speakers from overseas, and Muggins, having done a Nuffield scholarship on discussion groups, couldn't then shake off the semi-organisation. A lot of very good farmers in it, and a lot of interesting discussion. We rotated round each other's farms, brought in professional facilitators. That was the main my Nuffield was the fact that a facilitator was crucial, and a payment was crucial for people to but feel as though they belong to a group and going off on tour. But sadly we haven't been on tour for a good while, but that brings its own benefits in terms of people getting to know one another and having a gelling team effect, I suppose.
And because Liz and I were talking about discussion groups today, for some farmers, I think they can be quite intimidating places if you've never been to one.
Yeah.
What would your kind of sales pitch, I suppose, probably the wrong word, but what would you say to encourage someone who's not been to one?
Well, we have had sort of entry-level herdsman's groups running alongside, and Andy, who's farm manager on our other farm, manages that, and I think he is actually chairman of Star Grazers currently. Oh, I'm on two screens now, that's disconcerting. And he would say that's a really good step up, because sometimes if all of the farm owners are at a group, it tends to be those discussions transfer to global economics and more management of staff, and yet the the herds people on the ground benefit hugely from those discussions, but want to have more knowledge improving about how people are coping with the bad weather, how people are coping at calving time, what little intricacies can we learn on farm, not necessarily talking about how the powder price in Australia is affecting the exports in the future, and whether they should be buying forward, and decisions that farmers all mull over. And so, yeah, just by listening, you gain a huge amount from going to discussion groups, and I do sadly miss them because I haven't been to one for such a long time. We have tried to run them on Zoom with star grazers, and those work so. I think the technology, people are getting more used to it, but nothing.
It's not the same, is it?
A good kicking of tires around somebody's farm and learning. So.
Yeah. And the whole OMSCO thing, because I was just listening on that your podcast. It's quite a big deal, isn't it? And you've done the OMSCO have done so well.
I will mute. There we go. Oh. Can I move to the computer because the picture's better?
Yeah.
Shall I turn this other one off?
This is gonna go.
Sorry, Liz. Here we go. Leave on that one.
He's now on mute.
Unmute.
There we go.
Is that clearer?
Yeah, and you don't sound like from a 1970s pop film now as well.
I
there we go.
I love that.
It's only taken 35 minutes to update Windows. So
perfect.
There we go. Now we're away. So what was the question again?
So on OMSCO, tell us a little bit about OMSCO and also your work with them in America, which kind of blows my mind a little bit how you managed to get that deal.
So OMSCO have always been a very forward-thinking cooperative. There's 250 members, for those listening that don't know the format of it. A true cooperative running the length and breadth of the country and into Scotland and Wales. And always looking for opportunities to export milk overseas, because as the recent chairman Nicholas Sapphire always said, we need to keep the supermarkets honest in this country and develop premium avenues for selling milk. And America are desperately short of butterfat at the moment. Their shopping habits have changed, so there became an option of using a well-renowned cheese producer in Somerset to export and link into American markets, and that brings in different markets. The whole supply chain is working, and we've had to change our farming system to become aligned with the American production system. So that means no antibiotics for the lifetime of the dairy cow. So we've learned and pushed ourselves into a different envelope there, and that's going very successfully. And further afield, markets growing in China with their ever-growing population. And the co-op is very, very forward-thinking and looks at different markets, different avenues, because if we were purely selling milk into a whitewater contract in the UK, then there wouldn't be a premium to do what we're trying to do with our organic production.
So a very basic question, but say, I don't know, you have a cow, I don't know, cuts herself, or does something you have to give her antibiotics for. She gets a really bad case of mastitis, or what do you do with her then?
So yeah, we've got one example this year. We had a cesarean on a 7th calved cow, and so vet came out. We decided it wasn't going to come naturally, and we have very few cesareans. Luckily, I think in our 20-year marriage, we probably had 5 or 6 over and we're calving 250 here and 250 on the other farm. And did the operation, gave her antibiotics, gave her the full palliative care to get her back into the milking herd. Her milk then, once the withdrawal period had ended for the antibiotics, went into the baby calf rearing system, and she stayed in there until we didn't have any more calves to feed. And then there's an option of, could we sell her to another farm? Sadly, at that age, I didn't think it was viable, so she went as a cull animal. Antibiotics are not our go-to area of first intervention. We work extensively with the vets in terms of preventative disease control, so vaccinations and minerals and fertility and all those sorts of things in terms of creating a healthy herd, lameness control, all those avenues, good cow tracks, not making them wade through mud, making them walk down tracks which we've covered in AstroTurf and concrete sleeper tracks that are sound and dry. Yeah, trying to avoid it as much as we possibly can. Use of homeopathy, use of apple cider vinegar through the water system. Lots of different techniques that we've picked up from others. So keep
and how the cynic in me, and I really want to. Yeah, I'm kind of on with you. But if you said cider vinegar to a kind of conventional dairy farmer, they might think, But
that isn't the wackiest either, Nicola.
Well, tell me the wackiest.
The wacky one is we're in an experiment with the Woodland Trust and Harper Adams at looking at self-medicating with willow trees. And I was rather hoping the results of the leaf analysis would have been back last week, but I think COVID has slowed down the labs somewhat. So we're looking at whether the salicylic acid, which is the same ingredient in aspirin, will give a beneficial anti-inflammatory effect in livestock, and whether they will self-medicate. There was a researcher in New Zealand who said, no, cows will never self-medicate. But I have heard from others saying that, well, various animal species will go and search out clay to control toxins in plants. Why won't they search out certain plants to treat ongoing diseases if they have reason to eat a plant? They probably need to know. Perhaps we need to label it.
Price on it. And I suppose that because can you just tell us briefly about your the work you've done with the Woodland Trust?
So yeah, we've planted other species as well, so not just the willow. We've planted small leaf lime, hornbeam, sycamore, and elm as well. Looking at those from a browsing perspective, and the jury's still out on whether I need to plant the whole farm in avenues of trees. There are other benefits in terms of shelter, in terms of microclimate and drainage as well. And there's a real enthusiast at Wem near to the other farm called Peter Aspin, and he's one who always sparks my interest whenever I go there. So he would be one to look up. Silver spin.
For the cow, so the cows, are they sort of walked past the trees, or how do they get access to them, or you cut them and carry them to them?
Well, they've been in for 6 years now, I think, since we first planted them, and we've just planted a straight avenue of what would it be, 70 trees in a row. Just cracked willow and white willow in the two that are nearest to the dairy unit, and put an electric fence either side to stop them trampling them and killing the growing area. And they've shot away to 12 feet high. And this year we pollarded them. So cut them down with an electric chainsaw to 5 feet tall, stored what I thought would be about half a trailer load of willow leaves. 6 trailer loads later and a barn full of willow, and I'm going, what the hell are we going to do with that? So I'm hoping that during the winter time we'll be able to feed that as willow hay, and there are others that are doing such. So I'm willing to learn more, and hopefully, watch this space, they will graze it and eat it as willow hay and get some benefit during the dry period. It seemed to have stored well on trailers, on pallets.
Interesting.
I'm thinking Joseph might have some questions.
I do have one or two. I think actually the first question we got probably will be covered in the next session, but I'm currently trying to get over the image of a cow trying to self-medicate under a dodgy train station or something. But anyways, the first one actually was on your treatment. Can you use anti-inflammatories, Tim, as part of the American standards?
Yes. Anti-inflammatories and pain relief are definitely approved and need to be used as and when needed for lameness or mastitis or those sort of reasons. First port of call, of course, with any cow that comes into the milking parlour with mastitis would be homeopathy, sulfur, silica, carbo-veg, belladonna, bryonia, urtica, or phytolacca, different homeopathic remedies, and udamint, and tea tree oil, and separation out into a separate group so no more animals are infected, and clean milking, regular parlour maintenance, those sort of things. And yeah, we would resort to anti-inflammatories, dependent on cases, but it's a case-by-case scenario, really.
Cool. I think we're all about to take something there ourselves. You froze for a split second, and I think we were worried. The last one is just a quick one. When is the research due with the Woodland Trust, do you hope?
Well, there's a girl who's been out taking samples twice. It took about 8 hours to take all of the samples this year. I'd like to link them to some animal health results as well, whether I can do that on an on-field trial without extra assistance from researchers. I'm hoping we can do that. So yeah, I'm sure it'll be back within the next month, I'm hoping.
And then, as I said, there has been a question just about specific changes, what Sarah's been doing to our farm, but I think you'll come on to that next, Liz and Nick. But there was just one that's just popped in. Do you work with your vet on homeopathy, or do you self-medicate the herd?
Is that to me, Joseph?
Yes, sorry.
We have supportive vets, but their knowledge of homeopathy, I'd say, wouldn't be as high as some. All of our staff, bar Louise, has been on the homeopathy at Welly level course. I think Louise has picked up an awful lot, and more so than some of us. And so actively encouraging people to look at remedies and turn their hand to looking at the animal in a different way to try and treat them before the symptoms worsen, really.
I suppose this is the last question for now. So for a very deeply cynical person, say like, I don't know, me, how would you convince me that homeopathy actually works, given that it's, given that how it's actually formed in terms of molecules of water?
That it's not memory of water and all these other things and placebos, and you're treating, when you're treating yourself and you give yourself an arnica pilule after a battering game of rugby, and all of your bruises subside far quicker than they would have done without, how do you know that that's going to get the desired effect? Well, we've been using homeopathy for, Will Best's book, first of all, a simple herdsman's book we have, and that's just simple remedies given frequently, acute, to try and turn round the symptoms in an animal, say for example mastitis, coming in with a hot hard quarter, giving it belladonna, bryonia and urtica, we were absolutely amazed by the recovery the following day. And Chris Gosling and I spoke at a Soil Association event on the uses of homeopathy, and we both had the similar case scenarios. And the more people you talk to, the more knowledge you grow. And with the I suppose resistance to antibiotics growing, and antibiotics constantly changing, removal of antibiotics, I see a lot more sort of antibiotics being removed, saved for hospitals, likened to the fact that many agrochemicals are being removed, and they're so expensive to develop that if we can find and utilize alternatives and not have to prophylactically treat with antibiotics, that seems to be a very sensible approach. Our milk buyer are encouraging it. There's over 1,600 dairy farmers in America not using antibiotics routinely. Same for New Zealand as well. They farm along the same methodology as we are now. So it is eminently possible. It does take some thinking outside of the box and prevention. We talked through with the vets about mastitis vaccination this year, just to see whether that was a possibility, whether that was furthering our vaccination policy, which we already do for the likes of BVD, IBR and leptospirosis, transmissible diseases. So yeah, it's trying to be creating of as healthy an animal as we possibly can, as much grazed grass into them as we possibly can. They're on 100% silage currently because the fields have got too wet at Longnut, although they are still out during the day up at Webscott, the other farm. Just trying to be as proactive and giving people the tools to treat them as quickly as possible as well.
Brilliant. I better let you move on, but just a quick one. Can you just remind people what the title of that book was, the homeopathy book you referenced?
The Herdsman's Guide to Homeopathy by Will Best. Little paperback A5 book. Fascinating, very simple. Got lots of remedies, and the fact that a remedy bottle of 30 mils will treat 100 animals for just over £10 is so much cheaper than a 100 ml bottle of antibiotics for £50 treating one animal. So if you can do it, there's a price differential, and you need to see results as well.
Brilliant. I better hand it back, Liz and Nick, so you can move on. Thank
you. Sarah, just in terms of, this is a standard question that we ask everybody that we have a chat to, which is what do you, I can't even ask it now. What does regenerative farming mean to you? So how do you mean if someone comes up, so if you're selling some cheese to a different buyer and you talk about regenerative, how do you explain it to that sort of a different audience?
Yeah, so it is something that we get asked, especially I think maybe with our raw milk sales too. First, I like to, not with COVID, but ask people to come out, ask people to come onto farms to see what we're trying to aim for, to see that whole reduction from a monoculture to a bioculture, to look at the diversity within our farms, look at how the ecosystems can work to make our food, particularly I guess for us, the cheese, nutrient rich. I think that regeneration, as opposed to sustaining a system that was much more industrial, is we're also doing stuff with the Woodland Trust, looking at how we can regenerate it, starting, I know Tim's touched on soil, looking at the soil, the grass, the diversity of lays. We're not there yet. We're still learning. We've got our pollinator patches. We're planting way more trees, but I think for our customers, I always like to get them on farm and say, you know, look down, let's dig a hole and see what's in that hole, and let's look up to the sky and see if, you know, you can count a couple of different species of birds. You know, what we're trying to do is regenerate, reinvigorate our farms and steward them forwards, plus making something that tastes delicious without being a sort of an army of virtue about it, you know, without trying to be virtuous, just saying this is what makes our food unique, delicious.
And do you think your system's getting closer to sort of your husband's third generation, I think, isn't he? So sort of the grandparents, how they were farming that land, and do you mean, is it going back to that sort of generation, or is it different again?
Yeah, a little bit of that reinventing the wheel, a little bit of the you know, Grandpa and Grandma Appleby, Lance and Lucy moved here in mid 1940s. Walked his animals across here. The breeding was certainly what we're heading back towards, the more Ayrshire Shorthorn sort of crosses. The way he farmed, I suppose, yeah, I've been reading the English Pastoral, the James Rebank's new book about those previous generations and what we can learn from them. Paul's grandfather was a real character too. He was adamant that he didn't want to compromise his cheese. Or grandma was the matriarch. It was a very female role, the cheese making, and you know, he saw a lot of change. He saw a lot of change with liquid milk, with the Milk Marketing Board, and you know, how it suddenly turned into such an industrial foodstuff. And Cheshire, you know, there were 2,000 Cheshire cheesemakers in the 1920s. There's now just a handful of us doing it this way. And I think he definitely felt that he didn't, that sense of provenance and the terroir, the territorial side of our cheese making and therefore our farming was something that he definitely held to massive regard.
And do you
Sarah,
think
what do you, sorry Liz, you say you're not there, well, you're not there yet, but what are your big stumbling blocks? What are the things you think, oh, I just don't know how to tackle this?
Oh, I think, like I said before, the regenerative with beef is really interesting. We've learned loads with the different types of grazing, and we paddoced everything up, and we moved, you know, put in all the tracks. It was really exciting, but that's, for me, that's not enough. It's like, right, well, now what's happening with the grasses? Like, I can feel poor my husband doing that, like, oh, okay, you know, there's always something else. We have, you know, we grow great grass. We really do, but how can we do it better? How can we do it? You know, I said to Paul today over the vat, actually, making cheese this afternoon. Oh, I really think that we ought to just be doing 12 monthly cycles of the pastures. We definitely need to allow those grasses to seed. But how does that look with dairying? You know, we have 360 head. How are we going to maybe reduce the herd size but still be profitable? We get asked an awful lot about the calf at foot. You know, maybe once a day milking. I just feel like there's so much to learn about being regenerative farmers and a regenerative family. How it's all going to fit together in the future is really fascinating.
And I suppose it's interesting, the terroir, or I can never say it with conviction, but do you mean in terms of that sort of, we've become interested in artisan, but actually the generation that was 2 generations ago, that's just what they ate. It wasn't artisan, that was just reality. Yeah. So I think we're becoming more and more on a pedestal because it is so different to the other alternatives that are now available.
Yeah. And should it be on a pedestal? Should it be something that is tiered in a way. You know, you've got your entry level. I always think of it in a wine where you've got your $2.99, your $10.99, your Premier Cru, and I get that about food, that sometimes there is that sort of tier to it, but should we be, is that right? Should we be looking at it that way? And should we be not challenging it, saying, actually, hang on a minute, are we not making this cheese, in our case, efficiently? And where is it going wrong in that supply chain? I know we talked about this conscious consumerism and educating people, but somewhere in that supply chain, maybe we are putting, as you say, putting regenerative farming on a pedestal when should it not become more of a norm?
Sarah, when I got that, I ordered some butter and cheese off you, and the butter was, well, there was all amazing, but the butter, there was just, was it just whey, milk and salt?
Yeah.
And that's it. There's nothing that, so that simplicity, in comparison to if you look on the ingredients of normal butter, you know, it's,
Or I can't believe it's not butter.
oh yeah. Yeah, so
yeah, no, we definitely talk about that. Yeah. There being nowhere to hide, that we make these cheeses that are really part of our land. That provenance is what's unique, isn't it? And, you know, could you make Cheshire in Derbyshire? Yeah, you probably could, but it won't have the same terroir as what we do here.
And in terms of, do you mean you talked in terms of getting people onto farm? Do you sort of, in inverted commas, some of the more conventional farmers come on? Is it easier to engage with consumers than it is with other dairy farmers on what you're hoping to do with your farm?
So obviously, Tim talking about discussions, we have what we call Cow Club within the specialist cheesemakers group. The SCA is a brilliant association of cheesemakers, but there aren't that many of us that are dairy farmers and cheesemakers. And both Paul and I think we are incredibly lucky to have the whole picture of the milk, you know, that knowledge that you've got from the soil all the way through to that piece of cheese that's on your board is amazing. But yeah, I think maybe because we've always got one eye on the vat, it's a little different. But I love having anybody to come on the farm, or equally to go and visit and talk, is always worthwhile. I think it's you're always going to learn something. And, you know, we would love there to be another half a dozen or so Cheshire cheesemakers making it the way that we're making it. I find that we are on our own a little bit, Paul and I. There's you know, over a dozen cheddar makers that are making it in the same traditional artisan way, non-industrial. You know, there's a growing number of Wensleydale makers. There's a couple of Lancashire makers, and I think if we could have another couple of Cheshire makers in order for us to have those conversations, it would possibly make us wince for a while as we're sharing that pie. But the more we can share our knowledge and talk about what does make Cheshire unique, how we're doing it in different ways, because it is, and none of these cheeses are easy to make, otherwise we'd all be doing it. So yeah, I think the more we can talk to each other and to the, you know, having the buyers come from all over the country. We sell a lot to America. They're always really engaging, and they've been in a way catching up with us because they did very much go down the industrial cheese route, and now they're beginning to you know, take another look at their farming methods and therefore their cheese making methods.
Thank you. Just to clarify, you would speak to someone who makes Lancashire cheese? you do speak to other. It just felt quite partisan in that.
Yeah, we're very, yeah. So Graham Kirkham makes the most amazing Lancashire, and I absolutely love him to bits. And yeah, but we definitely have. There's definitely a real camaraderie. Definitely, the more we drink and eat, the more the conversation. I mean, we deal with soured milk. We deal with gone off milk day in, day out, and I think it does make you slightly insane, twitchy.
Liz, just make sure you never mention, I think you ought to add some apricots to this, Paul. That doesn't go down well.
I have very strong views about fruit and cheese too, so don't even get me started on that.
No, do not put a mince pie in your cheese.
No.
Like literally, yeah.
You know which buttons to press though, so that's good. Thanks.
Oh yes.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But Tim, I suppose bringing you in. So what does
Sarah? Very basic.
Oh, she's overruled. She's over.
Can I, Sarah? Sorry. Sorry, I just, Sarah, how long it takes to make a cheese? Very basic question.
So the milk we use morning and night milk, because it's the change in butterfat protein is different for each. So we like to have a blend of morning and night milk, and then that comes in the vat at about 7 o'clock-ish in the morning. We get it about 6:30, comes in at 7. Try not to pump it in. We have to look after that milk. You just want to gently trickle it into the vat, steam it, warm it up, and then the cheese making takes all day. It gets put into the molds and then into the presses, just in time for me to screech out of the dairy, get in the car and go and pick up the kids. And then it gets pressed overnight. Paul turns the presses down. We use really traditional hand turn presses. When he goes and looks at the carvers at about sort of 10:30, 11 at night, and then it gets knocked out the next morning, pressed again, wrapped in calico, and put down into the maturation rooms, and there it will stay for about 12 weeks. We're selling it at the moment. Yeah, and we rub it and turn it every day. It's a labour of love. It really is. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. That's good. Thank you. Liz, over to you. Sorry.
I was just going to ask Tim the same question. What does regenerative mean to you? And I suppose more importantly, would you class yourself as regenerative, or this is just how you wish to farm? I suppose there's two questions.
Yes, the term has come up recently, and I think we're farming as we would like to farm, whatever name you like to describe it. A few years ago, sustainable seemed to be the term bandied around. Organic. I don't believe organic's lost its gloss. I think people are just changing how they farm within that sort of moniker, that we farm with grass because that's how we want to farm. There's others that are autumn carved, there's others that are horticulturalists, that are arable organic farmers, but there is quite a sea change in people wanting to have livestock in soil important farming systems for many reasons, due to biological sort of pathways, more production. We're putting on different minerals onto the soil directly to try and increase the mineral uptake from the plant into the animal and ultimately into the food that we sell off farm. And so yeah, we're doing regenerative things, but while staying within an organic banner, really.
Sorry, Scout wanted to have a chat as well. And there's a few questions coming through, and as I sort of asked Sarah as well, which is if someone came to you and went, where do I start? Do you mean you're many years down the journey road? That doesn't even make sense. Down the road. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
If people go, well, where do we start? Do we start with the soil? Do we start with the grass? Do we start with the type of cows? Or is it?
I think you start earlier than that. I think you start with parents who have a vision of where we ought to be farming and what we ought to be achieving in the way we look after the ground, the land, the animals, and everything sort of fits into place. So nothing can happen without, as Sarah mentioned, a profitable marketplace. But we need to know how we fulfill that market, how we grow as much as we possibly can on farm to work within the realms of what were possible to grow in terms of energy production on farm, in terms of animals that suit the system, and crops that we can grow. We were incredibly mixed farm, I'd say 15, 20 years ago, with arable crops, with sheep, with beef, and buying in very little bought in protein. Somebody asked a question whether we buy in soy. No, we avoid buying in soy. We're farming with another organic farmer from North Shropshire's growing us some fodder beet. So we've made really good connections with other organic farmers, and if they've got better skills at weeding, I had my fill of driving a steerage hoe and weeding fodder beet in the cold, wet, sat on the front of a tractor while somebody else was trying to steer it.
I remember that too.
Oh yes, I've just sold the tractor after 35 years as well. That was our only tractor that predated our organic conversion. But yeah, trying to maintain a system that we're happy to work with, taking a good team along with us as well, training them, making sure they understand where we're heading towards and why, and yeah, trying to be as resilient. Doug Avery was fascinating to listen to, a New Zealander who was fighting some desperate drought in the Marlborough Sounds, turned his farm over to lucerne growing, and just purely with that one crop, that one paradigm shift and change of thought, he created a farm that's now doubled, tripled in size, and his son's taken over, and it's all hunky-dory. But he went through an awful lot of trauma to get there. I suppose our system is geared up towards trying to maximise the utilisation of grass on farm. Our natural resources are sun, light and water, and utilising that 6 inches of brown earth on top of the planet.
So I suppose, so it's about a bit about values, isn't it? So in terms of your parents, or how we, and that sort of farming, your experience of farming sort of gave you this good set of values, which you've then just sort of applied different or innovative techniques on that you've learned from other people or other systems.
Yes, not to say that it hasn't been tough along the way, and you make some changing decisions. A lot of people would say that we ought to be all year round calving, growing all our own feed on farm, but we've made conscious decisions that there's a work-life balance that we need to create, that we're not doing everything all the time ourselves, bringing in valued contractors, valued consultants and advice as and when needed. So, but be that financial or experts in the field of genetics choice or cropping choice, and yeah, we've made some good contacts with people who we trust in their decision making to fit within our business, really.
Thank you.
Tim, can I just ask, so if you're a farmer, a conventional farmer listening to this, and you think, oh, I'd really like to have it's a route I really want to go down, but you're in the kind of, you're geared up for conventional, where do you start, and do you think there is room for more organic milk?
There currently isn't a growing market for organic milk within OMSCO. Things are stable at the moment, and they don't want to encourage another big surge while things are in flux and changing. I can see that changing in the future and people being brought in at the right time in the right area with the right farming system. But that interim, how you gear yourself up to be close to organic and to get into the organic sales within OMSCO, or there are other organic milk buyers. I don't think they're taking on huge numbers of new members currently. There was one question from Emmy about taking a ReGenAg approach on a non-organic spring calving system, very high constituents. I see milk traded on milk solids in the future much more than it is on purely on volume, and we've been genetically selecting for high fat and protein genetics for a long time now, and we're up over 5% fat today as we speak, and very good protein levels as well. So it's a tough one, because I'd like everyone to farm how we farm with grass. It's what the consumer really favours, but I can see a lot of our neighbours going in totally the opposite direction, putting in robots, putting up bigger sheds, and there's other reasons behind that, whether that be TB, land restrictions on growth so they can buy in more feed, milk more cows on the same land area, but it does increase their costs, increase their hassle, but it does increase their overall milk check, and a lot of people would look at the milk check rather than look at how it fits in with the whole farm scenario. So there's no easy answer, I'm sorry, Nick. I'd like food to be more valued, and it's what we all listening would like to appreciate, that that good quality produce such as Sarah's Appleby's cheese and other locally produced food has the best value and is sought after by discerning consumers and paid for at the real price, and that's currently the sticking point, because of the ag bill going through Parliament and all these other factors, that we have a cheaper food economy than they do very often in America as well. They value their farmers and food differently, the French, and yeah, that's a whole economical governmental debate, which doesn't help somebody who wants to become more regen ag but doesn't have a premium milk or beef or lamb contract. And I see that as a tough one. I think you need to go knocking on the door and saying, when are you going to be taking on new entrants, new suppliers, really, which it will happen. I see it happening within the next 12 months with OMSCO.
Okay, I think we've got some questions, have we, Joseph?
Yeah, we have a few. I think one you've just kind of addressed, and that was a key point of a currently conventional farmer. 450 cows. The constituted contract, as you mentioned. I suppose, do we actually see in the current climate, can they go down this route with all the money you would save necessarily from purchase feed and fertilizers and vet mills? Would actually that still make you enough money when you compare it to the contract price? So if you're getting 28, 30p, is there enough of margin in there to actually make money on a more organic or regen approach without being organic? I think you've hit in that point. I think that's probably the challenge with some of this stuff is making that change.
Can you cut out enough of your costs?
Yeah.
Isn't it? And that's having to be really, really honest with your spreadsheets and your approach to the business. Would you not say to him, there's certain element of not going home, wrong word, of having to have that confidence in your business and your figures, and really sticking to that budget. That's, do I need it? Can I afford it? Can I do without it?
I think
you know, looking at labour, so labour, machinery, all those things, vet bills, we've radically cut huge, you know, amounts because of that. But you know, we're wanting to realise the potential of the farm as well. You have to look at that, and that, I guess, is also being honest with how much you're going to push yourself and the business to make those changes within a certain amount of time. I think you can easily say, well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it next month. I'm going to do it next month. If you're going to change your calving pattern, you have got to be fairly tight. You've got to make the changes and make them work. Would you not say, Tim, that the more you sort of go into it half-heartedly, the probably less it's going to be effective?
Yes, yeah, you need to look at all the options. You need to make sure that you're comfortable making those changes, and as you say, control your costs to the nth degree. And it's not just the big costs; it's every single cost. Looking at them in detail. So your feed bill, your vet bill, but some of them go hand in hand in having the right animal for the right system with the right pressure on it. And knowing how far you can take your grazing and saying, oh, yeah, we do need to bring them in now without creating welfare issues and those sorts of...
We turned out our Holstein Friesians when we started it, and they went, what? So it was, and the genetics have been a big change for us.
Crossing the Jersey.
We also have a few questions a bit more kind of on the practical side. So let's talk about grass and reseeds. So either or both of you, do you plow to reseed or do you direct drill? And if you do direct drill, how's your soil health? And then actually the grass mixes. So what goes into those grass mixes when you do reseed your pastures?
I've just had some soil analyses back, and I'll just grab those up to see info, soil, forage analysis. Here we go. So looking at some of the forage mineral analyses, we've been applying better grass through there. Oh, where are we? There. So we're trying to get the bars as far across to the high side as possible. So a balance of soil nutrients, which here we go. And here's the one that we take most credence and view of is organic matter. So this is the latest soil analysis, and to read out the main ones are getting our calcium magnesium ratio nearer to 10 to 1. We've got organic matters ranging from 4.9 to 6. I've taken some out of some particularly difficult fields recently. We do plow and reseed because we take a white clover lay, and then when that's becoming unproductive, we will put that back into a whole crop, and two choices, either pea and barley undersown, or this last year we've grown oats on some fields in order to try and kill off mum and dad with dock digging by hand. And very nearly did it. That's not to be encouraged. That was an experiment that went badly wrong. We're not afraid to sort of list our failures and the practices that didn't quite work. And that's what discussion groups are good at, going on farm and going, what on earth have you done that? Yeah, don't copy that. That didn't work at all.
I was wondering why you were buttering up your parents so much.
Yes, to bring them back down to earth. So there's some fantastic shots of us all bent over forks after a hard day dock digging. So that happens to be the downside. It's not all a bed of roses. So I've got a very strong back from rowing, and that seriously tested it digging docks by hand, but didn't do half as many bucket loads as Dad and Mum did collectively. So we do plough. We don't tend to disc cultivate, because if there is one dock, you'll end up with 20 docks growing from the same root as if you use a disc, chopping them up into many pieces. That was learnt a long time ago.
Well, I'm originally from the west of Ireland, and for years I thought docks were a crop we were growing on our farm. So I'm well used to seeing them.
Yeah. They're full of potassium, they are, Joseph, and the cows will graze them. We have very, very few docks, and it is not an issue at all on the grazing platform. The cows graze them because they're returning to the field every 30 days. The dock goes, throw up my hands. I'm not going to compete with extensive block paddock grazing systems.
So in that paddock grazing mix, what would be in it? Because you mentioned your white clovers, and then obviously you mentioned your Reseeds going into more oats or whatnot. Is there any other plants that you don't want to make?
A mix of ryegrass, clovers. We have gone around most of the paddocks now, grazing paddocks at home, with hybrid ryegrasses, so tetraploids, clovers, large leaf clovers, and the most important one, we put in a chicory and plantain, because when the neighbours look over the hedge, they go, oh, broadleaf weeds growing there. Tim's got an awful dock problem. I said, no, it's actually a deep-rooted herb, increasing the tannin and therefore controlling worms, and that usually stumps them. And they go, oh, we could try that. And interestingly, our neighbours have started to grow some terrific crops of red clover as well. That is one of the mainstays, and we're constantly looking at newly bred varieties. Tend to be the Aber varieties, because they're bred to similar conditions. Our rainfall ranges from about 28 inches to 35 inches per year. Dad might correct me on that. It's very variable, and it comes at different times of the year now. And interestingly, tonight or this afternoon, I've been mowing some red clover, fourth cut, and Dad's going to carry on mowing a bit more tomorrow if I can encourage him while I'm having a slightly quieter day.
Unfortunately, I don't think we probably don't have much time for you to butter them up even more.
I didn't realise it was the task list as well by the end of
I'm going to apologise because I won't get through all the questions because I am conscious of time, but just one for you, Sarah. Do you add value diversity in your cheeses too, or is it essential to your model to stick to Cheshire? So for example, do you double Gloucester, or you try other cheeses, or are you just focusing on doing the one?
No, we've made double Gloucester. We're not making masses of it at the moment because there was a big export. We were selling a lot of it to America. We're not in Gloucestershire. We don't massively have the USP. So most of our Neal's Yard, Paxton, Whitfield find it a slightly harder sell, I suppose, because they want to engage with customers in that way. So obviously us making Cheshire and Whitchurch that's a bit controversial on the border. Yeah, I think we're definitely trialing bluing our Cheshire, doing green fade, they used to call it years ago. It'll happen when I don't want it to happen, and then when I want it to happen and I pierce it, it sometimes doesn't. But through trying, I guess messing around in the cheese vat, you definitely find that you are improving our Cheshire make, because the more questions you ask, the more you sort of try different things, it definitely benefits what we do day to day with the Cheshire. But I wonder down the line whether we would make something else, but I think that would be more likely to be another product. So we have our whey fed pigs, So we're probably more likely to look at charcuterie or some way of utilising another part of the milk in order to make another product. I think for us, the Cheshire is probably enough of a diversification, and we'd like to be on about 40-45 tonnes a year, and that sits comfortably with both Paul and I being able to be on the farm and in the dairy. I think, you know, we like doing both.
Well, I was going to suggest like Wensleydale or Apricot I actually like, but that seems to be the minority of one, so I'm going to leave it.
Yeah, just leave it.
Oh,
I don't think we've any
start
more
with
time.
Stilton with cranberry. Anyway.
Right, and don't put it in a jar. Please don't put it in a jar.
We're gonna start a war between fruit cheeses versus non-fruit cheeses. I think there's enough of a division in the world. I'm going to leave it there. So
sensible decision, Joseph.
I don't care. As long as you're eating cheese, we're happy.
Thanks, Joseph. So generally, as Joseph said, we're sort of out of time really, but some really interesting questions coming through just in terms of how sort of on the practical we're using red clover and various elements. So I'm sorry we can't get to them. But thank you very much, Tim, Sarah, Chris and John also for standing in. We appreciated that very much. So yeah, thank you very much. But I suppose over to Nick really, in terms of what would your sort of key messages really be from this evening's chat? What have you taken from tonight?
That forward-thinking parents are very handy. I had one. My mum's quite forward-thinking. Dad, no. So yeah, I think to have a pair is a real asset, and I hope Sarah and Tim's kids realise how lucky they are and what kind of they're just going to have a really good kind of platform to take over, and it's just a massive head start, and to have all that in your head, it's just great. So well done, Mr. and Mrs. Downs Senior.
Yeah, and I think it's highlighting, I suppose, one of the elements of this evening's chat was also highlighting that sort of third generation bit, wasn't it? The sort of intergenerational farming, which we've previously had conversations because we end up with falling out with family members, and it highlights that actually, I'm not saying everything is a bed of roses in Shropshire, but it also shows the positive of farming alongside your family members, although sometimes it's not always that positive. And I think it's although I'm always a believer, but I think the discussion group, the support system, and just getting out and talking to different people, and I think COVID's particularly highlighted how we miss it when we can't do it. So I think it's trying to find opportunities for that really as much as we can in the next few months. And Zoom, as we're finding out this evening, has problems, but at least it gets us talking to other farmers about things. I think Nick has disappeared.
I'm sure.
She's back. It's been a technical nightmare.
I'm back. Sorry, no, and yes, no. Yeah. So our next one, Liz, we're going to go stacking.
We are.
Like
stacking shelves.
So hopefully, stacking shelves. So hopefully we're going to talk to two different businesses who have do a lot of stacking of enterprises. And then, so that will be the end of this month, because we're late this month. Yeah, late. So this will be the end of November, and then we've got a Christmas special that we're hoping we're going to have a very special guest.
Yep. And
has he said yes yet? No.
He has said yes. We
he has.
Have a date. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, marvelous. So that'll be good. But yeah, thank you all very much.
And it's not Santa, to clarify. Sorry, the special guest isn't Santa. It is someone else for Christmas.
Yeah.
We could dress up as Santa, but it is going to be someone else. But yes.
Oh, I was dressed up as if I'm going rowing.
Oh, look at that.
Look at the mustard.
I didn't want to see that for two reasons.
We've got
sorry, Louise.
Nick in a Christmas jumper, me looking like a lumberjack. So it's
What was that? I missed that.
Anyway, before it descends into chaos, this is for the Christmas special.
Yeah.
Massive thank you to everybody loads of questions, loads of interest. So thank you very much, Tim, Sarah, Louise, Chris and John. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all very much. Yeah.
Bye for now.
All.
And thanks, Joseph, too.
Oh yeah, thanks, Joseph. I forget him.
Yep.
Oh yeah, thanks, Liz. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, to you too.
Thanks for the question on Bokashi, Dan.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night, Alistair.
Bye.
See you all.